Today I will be showing you how to go from this level of rendering in Magicavoxel to this. So you can find this image in the description of this video, and also you can download the Magicavoxel scene if you want it. My name is Pedro Casavecchia, and I will also ask you to go to my Instagram account, Synth Hunters. It's where I put all my voxel art and it's my game project, so I would love if you could go there and check it out. Without further ado, let's start. I already have my model painted and finished, and if you want to know how to do this, I suggest you just Google Magicavoxel tutorials in general. There's plenty of tutorials that explain all the modeling tools and all tools for painting your models. So I will just start straight ahead with rendering. This is my scene. I have my car separated into two objects. One is the wheels and one is the body of the car. And I have all my colors here. So it's important to understand that each one of these colors can have different properties, not only on the color itself, of course, but also on the material it is. So you can turn this into glass, cloud shader, or car paint, or whatever. So each one of these colors will also contain different material characteristics. So you can have, for instance, twice the same color and change small things on the material to make it look more shiny or less shiny, etc. So in general, when you start your render, you will have something like this. I like to work in orthographic. I just personally like it better, but of course you can work in perspective if you like that better. So I will work in orthographic just as a personal preference. Then other options you have down here is the ISO. The only difference is that you can only move the camera sideways and you cannot move it up or down. The orthographic is like a free camera. Then you have this button here will basically focus your model in the closest view. You can see in this box, like now the closest point of view would be like this corner here, so it will go all the way there. And if you are more straight, it will go straight to that angle. You can also click on those angles to move the camera on a specific point if you want that. And also you can click this ruler, and here you have you can just like change the camera every 5 degrees I mean. So let's start creating our materials. You can alt click to just go straight to a material, to select a material. So if I'll click on this on the wheel of the car, it will automatically choose the material that it's being used for that part of the model. So I will start with the car paint, and I will start by explaining all the different materials we have here, remembering that all of this becomes only available when you go from the model tab to the render tab. Then we have all of these options here, and these are different tabs, but you can also click all and have all of them in the same place. But just to make it simpler, I will go one by one. So right now I'm working on this brighter car color, and right now we have a diffuse material. This means this is the simplest material you can get. It doesn't have any reflection or any transparency, just a very basic material. But it's very fast on the render. You see that every time I move the camera, it starts rendering and it goes quite fast. So the next material we have is the metal material, and you can see that it already starts introducing some shine into our model, some reflections. And as soon as you change from diffuse to metal, you will have a bunch of options here. So the first one is roughness. Basically, roughness will mean how sharp is your reflection. If I go closer, you can see right now with the sharpness in 0, I have a very sharp reflection with the roughness in 0. So if I start introducing more roughness, then this reflection becomes more diffuse, and you can go all the way to 100 and have a very, very diffuse roughness. Then the IOR, I'm not sure if it means index of reflection or refraction. It makes sense that it's reflection, but well, whatever. Basically, the more you have here, the shinier your model will become. You will see more of this reflection on your model. If you put 0, you won't have any reflection, and if you start introducing some IOR, you have more or less reflection. So you can have it more diffuse and more present Then this is more of a plasticky reflection. If you want more of a metallic, proper metallic reflection, then you need to introduce the metallicness. And right now you will see that the model reflects more like a mirror. So if I remove all the reflection, you will see we'll introduce some color, like it will become the color of the thing that is reflecting. So if this was green, you would have some green into that reflection as well, because that's a property of the metals. And well, you can also have more or less of this. I generally don't really use it too much. I like better this plasticky reflection. Then the next material we can check is the emissive material. So by default, emission materials will just remove any shadows from the model. But if you want them to actually emit light, you need to start adding more emission and more power. So if you have the power on 0, it won't produce any light. If you start adding more power, this mesh, this geometry will start emitting light, photons of lights that will bounce on your scene and light it. And also the influence of this emission will be driven by this slider here. So you can have just a bit or a lot of it. Good. Next we have glass material. The glass material has pretty much the same properties as the metal, but it also has, it generally comes like that by default. Click that to have like a glassy material. So if I add transparency, it will become more transparent here. I will just remove the density just to show you, and the roughness. So as you can see, you can start seeing through this geometry now, and the more roughness you add, the more diffuse will be this glass. So it becomes more like a frosted glass, and the more IOR you have, the more reflection this glass will have. If you remove everything, you won't have any reflection. It will be absolutely transparent. You will still see shadows, but it will be like invisible. So always keep a bit of an IOR. In this case, IOR will mean the index of refraction. So if you want to make something specific, you can find the specific number. I think water is 1.33. Probably will have less roughness unless it's very cold. So yeah, that's basically the theory of this material. Now the density will introduce the original base color you have. So the more density, the more color you will have on your glass. So if you want to make a colored glass, you need to add more density there. Great. So inside of the glass material, you will see that you have other options. I'm not sure why you have all of the options inside of the glass material, because you also have the same in blend material. I guess it gives slightly different results, so just experiment with these. But you have like a cloud shader that you can maybe mix with the glass. This is more of a fog shader that works much better when you're using cloud. And then you have a subsurface material that works pretty similarly in blend and in glass. But yeah, I generally only use this one on glass and do everything else on the blend material and the cloud material separately. So let's go then to the blend material. In here you will have pretty much the same options. In my opinion, the results you get for the subsurface material are a bit better. So basically this material, what it does, as you can see, it introduces more of a meaty transparency. So it's like a candle or like a human skin. So if you want to reproduce something like that is a bit transparent but not like glass, you can use this material. So basically what's going on here is the photons of light penetrates the model and they bounce inside of the model, so they create a different kind of refraction. Yeah, so that will be very noisy. As you can see, it has a lot of noise, but we can fix that later. So you also have the same things. You can also have like a glass material that works pretty much the same, and then the cloud and the fog material. But let's move on to the cloud shader specifically. So I find that it works a bit better in here, but maybe it's just my imagination, I'm not sure. So basically this cloud shader, you will need to move the light. We're going to speak about lights in a moment to find a better lighting for it, so it's more interesting. The more face you have, the less of the color will get in this case. So if you want like a colored cloud, you can just have some color there, otherwise just make it white. But if you don't have the light pointing in the right direction, it might look a bit dark. I'm not finding an example here, but you will sometimes have to play it a bit with the light, so it affects how this looks. So let's go back to my red color, and that's pretty much all of the materials. Feel free to explore them a bit more to understand better how they work. In general, for my renders, I try to use always, you can click and drag to select all of the colors, and I will use a blend material with subsurface selected. Let me just reset it. There you go. And maybe not that much transparency. So let's start with this and then we can tweak it. So this is what I did for all of the car. You can have things set up differently, so feel free to change those things. For instance, if we could make this darker part, instead of having that material, maybe it could be more of a metallic, shinier material, or we have a third one here, we could make it a glass. So experiment to find something that you like for your model. So try using different materials and whatnot. But yeah, well, for the sake of this tutorial, I will just keep it as subsurface material on everything. I just like a lot how it looks. Good. So now we improved a bit the shader of the car. Let's go and start talking about lights now. So by default you will have a sun, yeah, and a sky. So you can change the intensity of the sky and the intensity of the sun, and you can also change how sharp or how diffuse these shadows are by changing the area here. So the more area, the more the shadow will be diffuse. I generally don't like to work with sky. I like much better to use image-based lighting. So to change that, you just click this last icon here, and it will automatically start lighting the scene using an image. These images are called HDRIs. You can hunt on the internet for different ones. I suggest you try with small ones, like these images can be megabytes and megabytes of size. So try to find one that is not super huge to make it faster on Magicavoxel, but you can probably use whatever image and it will work. So if you double click on it, you go to wherever you saved Magicavoxel, you will have 4 options. So if you change them, you have a more blue night image, then you have more of an overcast sky. This would work better with a diffuse shadow, because overcast skies produce diffuse shadows. And then you have more of a red saturated night lights. So whatever one you use, I will use the default one. You can change its intensity, and also you can change the rotation. So someone asked me how to plan the lighting of your scenes. I will say that for the things I do, what I've been posting so far, I generally just look for an angle that I like and I start trying to find the lighting that works for it. I don't really plan ahead too much because I'm generally improvising with voxels until I find something I like, and that becomes something else. So I don't really plan a lot. I sketch, and then when I like something, I try to develop it as much as I can. So sometimes you will find a nice angle, but be careful not to not to use a full-blown light. Sometimes if you rotate it just ever so slightly, you will find that the intensity of that shine is a bit less direct, and you might get nicer results with that. Also, it's very important to try to find a lighting angle that really shows the shape of your object, because sometimes things can start to blend together too much. So it's good to try to find the right light angle that really shows the detail of your model, that is not too dark or is not too shiny. So right here I have a nice shine here, and I still have some lights in these edges, so you can really understand all the shapes of the car. So in general, keep rotating until you find something you like. If nothing works for your model, just try the other HDRIs. Something will work. So then you can also change the intensity of the sun separately. This light will produce shadows and everything, but if you want an extra light, you can also change. You see, have an extra shadow there. Change the intensity and the rotation of this one. If you use both, I generally suggest you align them, because that will give you more realistic results. But it's just in case you want like some extra light somewhere else. Maybe you wanted some detail or to be more like that instead of just having such a faint light. I just like how this looks, so I will just go with this. And you can also go over 100, but your things will start looking very burnt, very overexposed. So just keep it 100. It should be fine generally. So I will align this again real quick. Then what else we have here? This is a bit more advanced. You don't really need to worry. I never really touch these things. So let's leave it for another time. The next thing I would like to talk about is the camera. So if you click on the camera tab, you will have some options here as well. You have aperture, is basically how much depth of field or the focus you will have on your image. Right now it's on 0. So if I start introducing aperture, you see now the depth of field number is 0. If you click anywhere, that will draw a number here. This is basically the distance between the camera and the object, so the program knows where to focus. So if you click wherever on your image, this number will change. You can also introduce a number by hand, and then if you reduce the slider here, you'll have more depth of field or less, all the way to 0. Then something else I will talk about before moving on, so I can show you this with an example, is lights, mesh lights in Magicavoxel. So I have this shader here, is applied in these points here. I will change it to an emissive light, not so strong. And if you can see right now, they are emitting light, but they are very sharp. So we will start working on that very soon. So first, let's go again with the aperture. As you can see, when you have lights, in general you will have what is called bokeh, or it can be also called, I don't know, it's just a light out of focus basically. So in here, the blades, this will represent how many sides this circle will have. If you have 0 here, the program will just interpret these lights as spheres, right? So the thing is that this is not a geometrical shape. The program can produce 0 sides. So if you put 3 sides, which is the minimum, they will start looking like triangles. If you put 5 sides, it will look like those old cameras with 5 sides. If let's try to make it more exaggerated. Yeah, there you go. Right now it has like 5 sides, and then if you keep adding numbers, it will become more and more rounded, and 0 is like infinite sides. Yeah, so let's keep it on 5, something like that. And then the next number is the rotation of this bokeh. So if you change it, it will just basically change the rotation if you want to be very specific about the position of your depth of field lights. Good, so moving on, what else we have? I will just make it less strong right now. Good, so we have these are post-processing effects, so they won't interrupt your render. You see that every time I move the camera, the render starts processing all over again. But this doesn't do that. This is just a post-processing effect. So you can add more or less exposure, like in the camera, and you can add vignette, which basically is like a dark outline. If you want to have those things made in Magicavoxel, you can also do that on Photoshop or whatever. Then the bloom effect. For you to have like a shine effect outside of the light, you need to play the bloom effect. This will start calculating separately, so you will have like more render time. It will take longer to render, but it will calculate this extra glow effect on the lights, right? If I remove it, you see it's very sharp. If I play it, it adds this foggy light effect, which looks really, really cool. So the options you have for that is mixing it more or less. This is like opacity 100%, you see it or you don't. And then you have the size that this light will expand. And then the aspect, it will look more like a star or less. This depends on the amount of sides you choose here. If you have 0 sides, it will look like a line. It's very weird. But if you want it to look like a star, and it might be rounded, you can put like 9 sides or something like that, 8 sides. And well, yeah, it will still look like a star. This is the way it looks. Otherwise, it will look like a line. But you can just remove some of that, and you will have more of a foggy effect, not so specific. Yeah, but if you had 3 sides, just to show you, you will have less rays being produced. So you see now you have less rays. If I put 8, they multiplicate a bit. Good, so that's basically it for the bloom effect. Very cool effect, I really like it. Then let's talk about some other things we can do here, and that's about the background. Right now we have a gray background. You can choose other colors. Or you can choose a ground color. So the difference is you have all those options here. If you have a background, it will be a color, but it won't produce any shadow. So if I change this to whatever color, let's put something like a peach color, you see it doesn't produce any shadow. It's just a colored background, or you can have it transparent. And this way you will have this image floating in alpha, which means a transparency layer. In color you have RGBA, red, green, blue, and alpha. And alpha is the transparency channel. So if you use a software such as Photoshop, you can have this will be cut out, and you can put it. It's like a green screen. You can put it on top of something else, and it will be transparent. It won't save this black color behind it. So that's for the background. Now, if you use a ground instead, you will have shadows. So in that case, you will have to change the color of that here. Let's make the same color just to have the example. Make it a bit darker, a bit warmer maybe. So there you go. Now it has shadows. And then other things you can play with is the shape here. When you are in render mode again, you can choose these different shapes. It's just if you want to make it look like Legos, or if you want to smooth the edges of the voxels. There's this clay one that is also very cool. This even looks very realistic, looks like a toy car right now. This depends on the look you like to achieve with your voxels. I really like the square nature of the voxels, but well, you have also spheres, for something can be cool, and cylinders which look like these elongated cigarettes or something. It's weird. Good. So that is pretty much all you might need about rendering to have a nice looking image, or at least to have quite an improvement on your render. So now it's time to, let's say we're happy with this. We could of course continue to work and add more and more detail, but let's say we like this and we are finished. The next thing you will do is select a resolution and an amount of samples. So your resolution will be, for instance, if you want to make this a wallpaper, then you might choose 920 by 980. So this is a general 16:9 resolution that you can use for if you want to make this into a wallpaper. My screen is bigger than this, but Magicavoxel only goes to 2048, unfortunately. So this is the biggest image you can create right now. Maybe they change this on the future. And then the next thing we have is the samples. Samples basically are the light emit photons, let's say, right? And each photon will hit your model and bounce around and create your image, like will let you visualize your voxels. So the more samples you have, the more photons will be created, and therefore you will have less noise on your render. It will also increase a lot the render time. So right now you see I move the camera and it renders quite fast. My computer is quite fast, but still renders fast. If I go all the way down to 1512 to 512, it will render much faster. But if you want to get rid of all of this noise, you might need to go very high on the samples, mainly if you are using Subsurface scattering shader like I am. Then you will have a lot of noise, because what I was telling you, the light is bouncing all over the place and inside of the model, so you might need to add a lot of samples. So basically you can just start your render, let it do its thing. If you find that it has lots of noise still, you can just come here and add more, and basically you will just wait until your render finishes, and then there you go, you're done. So I will just make this smaller to make it faster. For the sake of this video, I will just do that. So then we will wait a second for the noise to reduce, and eventually it will get rid of all of the noise of the image. So let's say we like this, we don't want to change anything else, the noise is reduced, I put all I wanted here and it's finished. To save this image, you need to click this camera icon. So you can also click here, render, but I don't know if they fixed it on this version, on the latest one, but the last time I tried, it doesn't really save the bloom effect, and you will find some problems, which is a shame, because you have this option for a turntable which will make like a 360 render of your model, which is very cool, but it won't save these light effects. So if you want those, you will have to click on the camera. So going back to it, let's save this image. Even with the noise is fine, you just let it finish for when you're doing it. You can save an image just by clicking that. And that's pretty much all I do when I create my renders in Magicavoxel, and I don't even use Photoshop for the things I post. I hope this helped you, and please follow my Instagram account, Synth Hunters. Check out what I'm doing there, my game project. This car is absolutely unrelated, but I just wanted to use it for the tutorial. So thank you very much, and see you.